Hi, my name is Sanjay Pawar, and today I'll be discussing the psychedelic drug ayahuasca. Ayahuasca gets its name from Quechua languages where aya means spirit or soul and huasca means vine, effectively giving us the name the spirit vine. It's a tea whose main ingredients come from the shrub Psychotria viridis and the vine Banisteriopsis caapi. It's one of the most powerful psychedelics known to man, and it was originally used by indigenous Amazonian people as a spiritual medicine or religious sacrament. They believe it provides insight into unseen spiritual realms and into underlying origins of physical or spiritual illnesses. It's seen a recent rise in Western popularity due to its therapeutic potential, with many enthusiasts lauding it the effects of one trip as being like 10 years of therapy or meditation practice. A little bit about the history of ayahuasca. Archaeological evidence points to use potentially as early as 2000 BC, but the first recorded evidence comes from Jesuit missionaries in the 16th century who called it the work of the devil. The first scientific evidence of ayahuasca use comes from botanist Richard Spruce in 1851. However, it wasn't until ethnobiologist Richard Evans Schultz, who many call the father of ethnobotany, uh, identified the key plants and compounds within those plants that go into ayahuasca in the late 1960s that we started to find out more about the drug. Uh, Dr. Dennis McKenna, who worked in Schultz's lab, led the Huasca project, which was the most in-depth research into ayahuasca that's been done to date. It investigated both botanical information as well as neurophysiological and psychiatric information. A little bit more about that project. There was a bit of a struggle to get government funding because of legal and political difficulties, as well as the lack of condemning evidence that would allow the government to ban the drug. So McKenna had to go elsewhere for his funding. Um, the study measured both acute and long term effects, and the key findings showed subjects experienced profound positive life and behavior changes, and there was long term evidence of serotonergic modulation. Basically, regular ayahuasca use in a ritualistic context with a supportive social environment was shown to be safe, with long term positive impacts on mental and physical health. Its preparation um, is generally pretty ritualistic as well. The shamans who take users on ayahuasca journeys insist that much of the spiritual benefit lies in how it's prepared with practices such as picking the leaves from the lowest part of the plant at sunrise while saying a prayer, etc. The two key plants are brewed into a tea along with a changing variety of other plants, which are said to contribute to the spiritual powers. And users are also encouraged to follow a strict diet, such as avoiding heavily seasoned foods, excess fats, other drugs, sex, as well as avoidance of monoamine oxidase inhibitors found in food, or more importantly, antidepressants, leading up to the experience. A little bit about the pharmacology of the active ingredients in ayahuasca. The main psychotropic component is dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. Uh, However, this is not typically orally active unless it's combined with beta carbolines such as harmine, harmaline, or tetrahydroharmine, which are also included in the ayahuasca tea. A little bit more about DMT. It's a serotonin 5-HT2A receptor agonist. It also binds the sigma 1 receptor, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But um, many psychedelics are 5-HT2A agonists, such as LSD and mescaline. This is a G protein coupled receptor expressed highly in the amygdala, neocortex, entorhinal cortex, as well as thalamus, hippocampus, and VTA. Um, Several studies show that stimulation of this receptor by DMT increases expression of immediate early genes and brain derived neurotrophic factor, which are associated with synaptic plasticity. Uh, the sigma 1 receptor that it binds to as well is associated with the endoplasmic reticulum and modulation of neuroplasticity and dendritic spine formation. DMT is endogenous to a variety of species, including humans, especially concentrated in the pineal gland. However, its purpose is debated. Some hypothesize that it plays a role in circadian rhythms, or that it's an ancestral neuromodulator without modern neural function. Because DMT, when ingested orally, is quickly metabolized by an enzyme known as monoamine oxidase A, shown here. Um, this enzyme needs to be inactivated in order for DMT to reach the brain and be psychotropically active. Um, the Banisteriopsis capi vine added to ayahuasca has uh, beta carboline alkaloids like harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine, which inhibit monoamine oxidase A, allowing DMT to go to the brain and bind the serotonin receptors. It's fascinating to me that all the years ago, before modern science existed, the indigenous people of the Amazon found two plants that worked so synergistically to produce such a profound, intense experience. Some of these subjective effects of this experience are your typical psychedelic effects: significant visual hallucinations, time perception is altered, um, but and these effects generally increase with higher doses. What's interesting is that regardless of whether users perceive the trip as good or bad, they often report an increase in personal or spiritual insight as well as personal growth. Some other effects: diastolic blood pressure increases, pupils dilate, heart rate increases, although none of these are permanent and none of them ever really reach dangerous levels. Ayahuasca is also a purgative, meaning that it will make you vomit or experience diarrhea. And to shamans and seasoned users, this effect is lauded as the release of negative energy or emotions built up over the course of one's life. Some potential benefits: it has shown to have pretty good uh, benefits towards relieving depression and anxiety disorders. The figure here is from a paper where they studied the mean scores of patients on the Hamilton rating scale for depression up to 21 days after ayahuasca injection. You can see a pretty clear decline there. Many other 5-HT2A receptor agonists, like LSD, have been shown to have similar effects. So this receptor being stimulated might be what's responsible for this. However, there's also monoamine oxidase inhibition, um, as well as selective serotonin reuptake inhibition by tetrahydroharmal, and then the other beta carbolines as well, which may contribute to its antidepressant effects. It also has been shown to have potentially really beneficial effects on addiction. It raises global serotonin levels, which may attenuate withdrawal effects from other substances. It may also mitigate against excess dopamine caused by dopamine agonists. Um, yeah, there is, in terms of risks or negative effects, there's not really a risk of dependence. The least lethal dose is over 20 times the typical ceremonial dose, so that's not really going to be a risk. In that paper from a couple slides ago studying ayahuasca's effects as an antidepressant, um, the worst, uh, most aversive effect of the drug reported was vomiting, and that was only reported by 50% of participants. There is the possibility that it will trigger a psychotic episode or the onset of schizophrenia. This is a risk that's prevalent in many psychotropic drugs, and generally is only a risk if someone is predisposed to those things. These can also be avoided by making sure that the user is prepared psychologically, that the setting is right, that there's proper social care afterwards, and basically just making sure they're taking care of themselves throughout the trip. Legally speaking, DMT is recognized as Schedule 1 under the Convention on Psychotropic Substances, but the plants containing it are not under international control, so you can grow and cultivate these. In the U.S., in 2009, the district court ruled that ayahuasca's use is allowed in religious ceremonies and is protected under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So in summary, ayahuasca is an ancient drug that is one of the most powerful hallucinogenic substances known to man, and it's shown a lot of potential for being therapeutic in regards to depression, anxiety, as well as addiction. However, I think a lot more research needs to go into this, especially considering how powerful its effects are on the psyche. And while this research may be hard to do considering legal blockades, I think it's important because early research does show such promising results. Thanks so much. I hope you learned something about ayahuasca today that you didn't know before. I will take questions now. Thanks for listening.